Aerodactyl is easily one of the fastest Pokemon from Gen 1, having an incredibly high attack stat and a great offensive typing in Rock Flying. But could he beat every single Pokemon in Fire Red if they had their best competitive moveset? Let's find out! To start off, this is the Aerodactyl I'll be using. He currently only knows Wing Attack, Ancient Power, Takedown, and Bite. I know it's a bit of a weird moveset, but this is only based around the ones he learns via level up. I wanted to start using only those just to see how far Aerodactyl could get with that limitation. Now, as for how I'm going to be facing off against each Pokemon, I modified Pokemon Fire Red to turn it into a gauntlet, where each room I go into represents a tier of competitive battling, going from the strongest in Ubers where there's both Mewtwo and Mew, all the way to the lowest tier that exists right now, which is SU or Sub-Zero used, with Pokemon like Farfetch, Onix, and Parasect. I also added some lower tiers that I personally made to differentiate Pokemon that are even weaker, and what better way to represent that than the first room, which is composed of the weakest of the weakest: Caterpie, Metapod, Weedle, Kakuna, Magikarp, and Ditto. Aerodactyl obviously had no problem against them, with the only one that could have been an issue being Ditto, but since he couldn't take two of Aerodactyl's stab moves, he went down easily like the others. With Aerodactyl's super high attack and speed, alongside two stab moves in Wing Attack and Ancient Power, he had almost no trouble making it all the way to the room that represents the Zero Use tier, which is the 5th one out of 12 and defeating a total of 52 Pokemon on the way, obliterating all of the rooms before that. Now, it wasn't like it was all easy, as Aerodactyl's multiple weaknesses started showing up during those fights, which can be seen by the multiple restarts he had while reaching the 5th room, having to deal with paralysis, missing ranges, crit water moves, and even infatuation. Both Squirtle and Nidorino required a miss, being Toxic and Iron Tail respectively, but I know that just teaching a move or equipping an item would have been enough to win against them. I just didn't do that because I got an early win and didn't get the chance to try. Other fights that I want to highlight were Kabuto, who didn't get the chance to attack thanks to Bite flinching him twice, and Clefairy, leaving Aerodactyl with literally 1 HP. Things start getting more tricky in the 5th room, as a lot more Pokemon stop being one-shots. For example, there was Koffing, who had Hidden Power Water and who I won against only thanks to the flinches from Bite. There was also Seeking, who I only won against thanks to Protect missing and getting a crit. Those weren't the only threats Aerodactyl faced off though. First of all, there was Magnemite. The Steel typing made my moves do no damage to him. Meanwhile, his Thunderbolts were a one-shot after some cheap damage from Toxic. I could wait for Toxic to miss or an Ancient Power Omnibus, but that is going to take too long, so here's what I'm going to do. Each time Aerodactyl faces a roadblock, I'm going to be giving him an extra tool that would give him a way of getting out. Because the problem was Magnemite, the solution was pretty simple. Just teach Aerodactyl Earthquake. And with that, Magnemite was an easy one-shot. The second Pokemon was Porygon. At first glance, he doesn't look like he would be an issue, but when you take into account that Aerodactyl doesn't know any strong stab moves and that Porygon knows Ice Beam, then you can start seeing why he lost. The obvious play would be teaching Rock Slide, but I thought of something better: Double Edge. The recoil would normally be a problem, but with Aerodactyl's ability allowing him to ignore that damage, it becomes a really strong move with no drawbacks. Thanks to that, Porygon became an easy two-shot. One quick note, those of you who are watching the video might have noticed that some Pokemon use Hidden Power, but the move is named weirdly. That's because I can't really modify every IV on the trainers, so Hidden Power is replicable. Because of that, I had to modify the game and make the moves myself. I know it's not that relevant for the video, but I thought I should clear that out in case anyone was wondering. Moving on to the poorly used room, it started great, with me going for Double Edge against Gastly and then losing because of that missed turn. Jokes aside, that fight was then followed by Kingler for some reason just never attacking me. Instead going for Sword Stance and then his substitute that missed thanks to a crit Earthquake, getting him out of range of being able to use the move. Pretty weird way to start the room. Then came Lickitung. He was super annoying when I fought him, taking a whole 8 minutes in a single battle. He was using Curse to raise his attack and defense and rest whenever he needed to heal. Aerodactyl's moves weren't doing any meaningful damage, so for a while, my best strategy was to use Bite and hope to get enough flinches to defeat him. That ended up not working, eventually burning through every power point on the move. I was resigning myself to losing to Lickitung's body slams, but out of nowhere, Aerodactyl got a crit double edge to win. I am so glad that I didn't have to do that fight again. I wish I could say that after that things went well, but then I had to fight Omanite, and his Hydro Bombs were one-shotting Aerodactyl. Earthquake wasn't doing enough, and even when I gave him the Soft Sand for the 10% boost in damage, it wasn't working. I gave it a couple of tries, but I only saw one option left. I needed to use the Choice Band. It gives a 50% boost to physical moves, but locks you into using whatever move you pick first. That ended up working, but since I don't want to rely on the item too much this early into the run, I'll use it only when necessary for now. Like against War Turtle in the same room, who was a 3-shot without the item and could easily defeat me with 2 surfs. But the strangest opponent in the entire room was Tangela. It wasn't weird that I lost, since Tangela has a pretty high defense stat, I didn't have a super effective move, and he could usually Powder and Giga Drain. No, the weird part came in the solution, because after looking at Aerodactyl's moveset, I realized that he could learn Fire Blast. I have no clue why he gets that move, but even when his special attack isn't great, just by dealing double damage, Fire Blast was able to get a 2-shot against him, something that I doubt Wing Attack would have accomplished. And then there was Dragonair. This one was just annoying. He led with Thunder Wave to paralyze me, and then used Ice Beam to attack and Rest to heal when necessary. That's annoying by itself, but when you combine it with his ability Shed Skin, that gives him a chance of healing any status condition, it becomes insufferable. As on the first attempt against him, Aerodactyl got fully paralyzed multiple times, while Dragonair Shed Skin activated on the same turn he went for Rest, basically getting healed by a full restore. I ended up winning by landing enough attacks against him, but man was that fight frustrating. Next was the 7th room, and it was probably supposed to be more difficult than the last one, but because I forgot to unequip the Choice Band, it was full of easy fights. I'm sure I would have needed to restart against some Pokemon, like Dugong or Machoke, but by having the Choice Band, they were quickly defeated. The same happened in the next room, and since I only had to restart against 2 opponents, I'll group both of the rooms together to talk about the fights that gave Aerodactyl some problems. The first was against Pidgeot, and this one is on me. I forgot to heal beforehand, so while I did do a lot of damage to him with Ancient Power, he effortlessly won with Aerial Ace. As soon as I got Aerodactyl back to full HP, it was an easy 2-shot. As for the second one, it was Mr. Mime, and he had Thunder Wave to paralyze me alongside Thunderbolt to do massive damage and get a 2-shot. I got bad RNG on 2 attempts by getting fully paralyzed, but as long as that didn't happen, Double Edge easily took care of him. Following that is the underused room, and this is where the Choice Band stopped being broken. There were 2 Pokemon that made me restart, and they were Sandslash and Lapras. Sandslash was taking decent damage from Double Edge, but if he managed to set up a Sword Stance, his Rock Slide became a 1-shot against me. I gave it another try to see if it was a range, but then he just decided not to use Sword Stance and instead attack with Rock Slide from the start. The move was doing less than half, so without changing the strategy, Aerodactyl won against Sandslash. As for the Lapras fight, that one was pure luck, as his Hydro Pump was one-shotting me. Now, you would think that I won by getting him to miss, but no. Instead, I got the Omnibus with Ancient Power, and suddenly, Hydro Pump stopped being a 1-shot, which allowed me to hit Lapras again and defeat him. But as lucky as those fights were, 4 Pokemon in the room looked genuinely impossible right now, and they were Blastoise, Golduck, Golem, and Omastar. The water types are pretty self-explanatory. They just hit Aerodactyl too hard with their water moves while he wasn't doing enough to defeat them, even with the Choice Band. Golduck uses Hydro Pump, so there's a chance I could win by getting him to miss. But Blastoise and Omastar, I'd have to rely on getting a crit to win. Since they need a lot of luck to win, I'm going to save them for the end, right before getting to the last room. The one that actually surprised me was Golem, because for some reason, I thought that rock resisted itself. However, I was wrong, and with my Earthquake being a 2-shot, his Choice Banded boosted Rock Slide easily defeated me. Like Golduck, Golem's attack has a chance to miss, so I'll try later and see if that happens. Either that or a crit, whatever happens first. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe, as I'm going to be doing this for a lot more Pokemon and that really helps me grow. In the penultimate room before fighting the Uber Pokemon, things get a bit weird. For some reason, Aerodactyl said that having the choice band wasn't enough, so he started getting an insane number of crits. In total, he got 6 critical hits against 6 different Pokemon. Some of them didn't matter, like against Articuno or Venusaur, while others did matter, like against Marowak, Tauros, or Slowbro. I'm not sure about Marowak and Tauros, but I know that I needed that crit against Slowbro, because if I didn't, he deletes Aerodactyl with the combination of Calm Mind and Surf. I also had to restart against Executor, but that one was only because I got awful luck with Sleep Powder. I was already using Fire Blast for damage, so I made the decision of replacing the Choice Band for the Lumberry. It was still a tough fight, but thanks to Executor only attacking with Solar Beam, I had plenty of chances of waking up. And then there was Rhydon. As you might have guessed, it was a pretty similar case to the Golem fight, where Earthquake wasn't doing enough damage and his Choice Banded boosted Rock Slides were getting a clean OHKO. Just like Golem, I'm leaving that one for the end. The overused room was Nets, and it was honestly way easier than the last couple of rooms. There were still some close calls, like against Cloyster with his Stab Surf and high defenses, Jolteon with his speed and Stab Thunderbolts, and Snorlax with his incredible bulk. But it wasn't the impossible room I thought it would be. Of course, there were still Pokemon that needed restarts, alongside one that seemed impossible. The first one that needed restarts was, funnily enough, Aerodactyl. We were speed tied and he easily defeated me with Rock Slide. I was waiting for my Aerodactyl to win the speed tie, but that ended up not being necessary, as the opposing one ended up missing his attack, which gave me the chance to get a one-shot with Ancient Power. As for the second Pokemon, it was Zapdos. Ancient Power wasn't doing enough damage to him, while his Thunderbolts just turned Aerodactyl into a prehistoric fried chicken. I don't know why it took me so long, but the solution was to simply replace Ancient Power for Rock Slide, which ended up being a one-shot. Lastly, for the Pokemon that gave me the most trouble in the room, it was Starmie. If you remember Golduck, it's the same case, with him using Hydro Pump to get a one-shot, so I can just wait for him to miss. I defeated every other Pokemon in the room, so it's time to clear out the Pokemon I left until the end before going into the last room of the game. The easier ones were both Golduck and Starmie, only needing for a Hydro Pump miss before they were defeated by 2 of my attacks. For Golem and Rhydon, they were both using Rock Slide. That meant that I either needed a crit Earthquake or a miss, getting the former against Rhydon and the latter against Golem. Against Omastar, it got more tricky, as he resisted Rock Slide and used Surf, meaning that the only way to get past him was to get a crit. It ended up taking 20 restarts, but it was thankfully enough to win. Lastly, there was Blastoise. He took a bit more time thanks to needing to get either a crit or a flinch at specifically the second hit against him. If I got it earlier, I triggered his ability Torrent that boosts his water-type moves, turning Surf into a one-shot. I got unlucky on some attempts, getting the crit early or missing Rock Slide, but in the end, it was a flinch that got me the win against him. To end the run, it's the final 2 Pokemon, Mewtwo and Mew. I challenged Mew first since he seemed like the easiest and Double Edge was the best I had against him. It looked like it was a 3-shot as I hit him and Mew went for Swords Dance. I feared the Rock Slide incoming as I got him to the red, and then he countered with a Shadow Ball, which brought Aerodactyl to a third of his HP, meaning that another attack defeated Mew. Guess he didn't have the move. I then went for Mewtwo, and this fight was the complete opposite of the one against Mew. We were a speed tie, and he had Thunder to one-shot Aerodactyl. Double Edge was doing about half of his HP, but it was hard to tell if a crit would have been enough to win. Even more so when he had the leftovers equipped. I could try and get a clean victory if I get Aerodactyl Hidden Power Ghost, but I would need to win a speed tie and then get either Thunder to miss or a crit. And if I get Thunder to miss, then I would need to win another speed tie. That is way too much luck, so I'll have to say that even after getting this far, defeating Mewtwo is impossible for Aerodactyl. So, can Aerodactyl beat all 151 Pokemon in Fire Red with their competitive moveset? He gets super close, but no. He defeats almost every Pokemon in the Kanto Pokédex, and then gets stuck at Mewtwo. Still, it was an extremely good performance for a Pokemon that's not a legendary. Just goes to show how important having a good speed and offensive stat is. Even more so in this game if the offensive stat is physical, thanks to the Choice Band. Another great thing he had that I didn't even consider was his ability Rock Head. Being able to use Double Edge without the fear of recoil made it so much easier to get past Pokemon that were not weak to Aerodactyl stab or coverage moves. So overall, I think his performance was pretty good. But anyways, did I miss anything on the video? If you think so, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.